executed. Regarding those allergic to thiomersal, she informed that a lot was produced without this component, so this element will be considered so that the whole population can be subject to the application of the vaccine candidate. Although U.S. President Joe Biden has previously acknowledged the harm inflicted upon everyday Cubans by Washington's failed policies against the island, a change of bilateral relations remains on the fringes of his priorities. This is what the U.S. publication Newsweek pointed out in its article, amid silence, Cuba urges Biden to end cruel blockade that he too sought to change. According to Newsweek, during his time as vice president, Biden spoke in support of Barack Obama's efforts to relax travel and trade restrictions on the Caribbean islands. But while the White House is now pushing for a review in this area, so far there has been no high-level contact between the two countries. This was explained to Newsweek by Carlos Fernandez de Cosio, director of the Cuban Foreign Ministry's General Division for the United States. The Biden administration publicly stated that it's carrying a policy review, but we do not know the true pace and scope of this process, he said. During the last 4 years, more than 244 measures were adopted against Cuba, of which 55 were implemented in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Cuban diplomat explained. Friends from different continents, solidarity movements with Cuba, Cubans living in other nations, honest citizens, and international forces, the dream of a better world, participated this weekend in a new world caravan against the United States blockade on the island. Having as a president at the end of March a caravan in more than 60 countries, this weekend marchers raised their voices throughout the world to demand the end of the blockade. In the U.S., the Bridges of Love initiative, launched by Cuban-American Carlos Lasso, organized caravans in more than 20 cities, among them Miami, New York, Washington, Detroit, Milwaukee, Chicago, Los Angeles, Sacramento, and Oakland. In Latin America and the Caribbean, events were held in Mexico, El Salvador, and Santo Domingo. Marches also took place in Belize, Panama, Ecuador, Uruguay, and Argentina. And the 29th edition of La Huella de España Festival is concluding this Sunday. It started on Thursday and has been held on digital platforms due to the epidemiological situation generated by the COVID-19 epidemic. This meaning of art and friendship, which brings together the peoples of Cuba and Spain, was dedicated this time to prima ballerina Absoluta Alicia Alonso on her 100th birthday anniversary. Organized by the National Ballet of Cuba, the Ministry of Culture, the Spanish Embassy, and Cuban Federation of Spanish Societies, the official poster of the event showed the legendary Cuban dancer and equally prestigious Spanish dancer Antonio Llaves dancing the emblematic feat at Libitum, choreographed specifically for them by Alberto Mendez, with music by Sergio Vigier. And with this, we conclude this week in Cuba. Reporting remotely, I'm Jorge Millares for Radio Habana, Cuba.
Thanks, Jorge. Jorge Millares with This Week in Cuba. And you're listening to Radio Havana, Cuba. Special programming today, the Day of International Solidarity with Cuba and international caravans across the world taking place to demand an end to Washington's blockade of Cuba. Special reports today from all over the world. Let's get things started with Carlos Lasso. Carlos is the founder of Bridges of Love out of Miami. Puertos de Amor in Spanish. And let's listen now to Carlos Lasso.
Important day for Cuba and for the people of goodwill around the world. People are asking for the lifting of the blockade to the Cuban people. People are asking the U.S. government to lift the sanctions that have been there for 60 years, killing the Cuban people, stopping the development of the country. The sanctions affect Cuban families. The sanctions prevent us from sending money to our families in times of pandemic. It is hard It is unhuman that the United States government is keeping these sanctions. The United States and Cuba have to be breaches of law. They have to establish good relationships, and that's what are asking people all around the world. People are marching in Europe, in Belgium, in Africa, in Spain. 20 cities in the United States are joining today asking for the lifting of the blockade or embargo. In the city of Miami, hundreds of Cuban Americans are asking President Biden to lift the sanctions over the Cuban families. We want that the United States allow us to help our families, to send money to our families. During the Trump times, in the middle of the pandemic, Trump stopped the remittance to Cuba. This is something cruel in the middle of a pandemic, not allowing families to help each other. And it's not just not allowing the families to help each other from Cuba from Europa to Cuba, but also prevent citizens of the world to send money to their families in Cuba. Cubans living in other countries cannot send money because of restrictions imposed by the blockade. We are marching today, and we are going to keep marching. We are going to keep participating in caravans, raising our voices and asking the United States government to lift the blockade that weighs over the Cuban people. This is the beginning. This is early in the morning over here, and I will keep and stay reporting how everything is going. I already received many videos, many pictures of this celebration asking the U.S. government to lift the blockade. I hope that President Biden fulfill his electoral promise and lift the sanctions against Cuban families. God bless everyone.
Thank you to Radio Habana. Thanks for joining us on the radio special program today. International Caravans Against the Blockade. Taking place here in Havana, too, not only around the world, but here in Cuba, in the province to the east of it, in Havana, and also in the Atlantic, Santa Clara, right in the middle of the island. Major celebrations going on, and caravans and bicycles and motorcycles and cars going by, all expressing their solidarity with Cuba and demanding that the United States end its illegal blockade of the island. Up next, let's listen to Jose Perpier, a Cuban-American attorney who's been based in Washington, D.C. for many years, and is a good friend with Cuba, and he's coming to bring his statement now. Jose Perpier.
We want to find out the real purpose of the U.S. blockade against Cuba. We need only examine Washington's own government documents. The State Department memorandum that was dated April 6, 1960, lays out the real purpose of the blockade. And 61 years later, the logic of that memorandum is still the roadmap to Washington overthrowing the revolution. Let's look at the memo. It says that the majority of Cubans support the revolution. That's true. It says that there's no effective political opposition in Cuba. That's also true. It says that militant opposition to capture from without Cuba would only serve his and the communist cause. That the only foreseeable means of alienating internal support is through disenchantment and disaffection based on economic dissatisfaction and hurt. And it calls on the State Department and the White House to use every possible means to weaken economic life in Cuba by denying it money and supplies. And here's the real picture. To bring about hunger, desperation, so that the people of Cuba will overthrow the government. For the past 61 years, Washington has placed its knee on Cuba's neck, much like the policeman in Minnesota did on the neck of George Floyd. It's well settled that the policeman committed a crime in Minnesota. He was, after all, convicted of murder by a jury of his peers. And it's equally well settled that successive U.S. governments have been committing a crime against Cuba. Just as it is illegal to asphyxiate a human being, it is also illegal to try and asphyxiate an entire nation. Into official data, between April 2019 and March of 2020, the blockade has caused economic losses to Cuba of over $5 billion. And during the last 6 decades, the losses to Cuba, the economic losses to Cuba, are well over $144 billion. And Cuba's a small country, so that is an overwhelming piece of information. We're living now during the worst pandemic the world has seen since 1918, COVID-19. Millions are dying from the virus, yet the United States continues to try to deny Cuba access to medical equipment and supplies, as well as technology and software from third countries, if these include as little as 10% of U.S. technology. The blockade of the United States against Cuba is a blatant violation of international law, an act of war, an attempted genocide against an entire people. It qualifies as an act of genocide under Articles 2, B, and C of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, adopted by the United Nations in 1948. Even the OAS considers economic aggression to be a crime. The U.S. has tried to prevent Cuba from obtaining access to energy, to oil, to restrict the freedom of travel by American citizens, and not just American citizens. Anybody who lives in the United States, whether they be American citizens or not, are prohibited from traveling to Cuba. So if you are a Japanese individual who's studying at an American university, you may not travel to Cuba. It all stems from the Monroe Doctrine, where the U.S. thinks that it owns every nation in the Western Hemisphere. Well, guess what? The U.S. does not own Cuba. It doesn't belong to the United States. I dare to say that if the U.S. wants to tell states how to conduct themselves, it should concentrate on the states that it does control, Mississippi and Alabama, for example, and leave Cuba and Venezuela and Mexico alone. The blockade is also extraterritorial. It violates the sovereignty of other nations by telling them that its businesses there are not allowed to trade with Cuba if they violate any part of the Helms-Burton blockade. Things like this is why the General Assembly of the United Nations has condemned the blockade almost 30 times. And the last time the United Nations voted on this issue was in 2019, and we saw 187 nations condemn the blockade and only 3 to support it: the U.S., Israel, and Bolsonaro's Brazil. Notwithstanding these UN resolutions calling for the end of the blockade and saying that they violate international law, the U.S. continues to maintain and even strengthen the blockade. Moreover, Washington is also spending at least $20 million a year for regime change programs against Cuba, creating and paying people on the island to dissent and to stage political performances in opposition to the government. And Washington knows very well that fake news generated by so-called journalists in the pay of the United States government is as noxious as any virus. Despite the blockade and notwithstanding the U.S. government's attempt at regime change, this little island of over 11 million people is still there. And it's not just struggling to breathe, it's also providing doctors and nurses throughout the world, combating the pandemic in Italy, Portugal, Africa, Latin America. Wherever people need help, you'll find Cuban doctors and nurses there helping them heal. This weekend, caravans throughout the world are clamoring for the U.S. to end the blockade, to let Cuba breathe. It's a beautiful sight to behold.
Thanks to you, Jose Ortega, Cuban-American attorney based in Washington, D.C. And you tuned to Radio Habana, Cuba. Thanks for joining us. Special programming today on Radio Habana in English as we bring you reports from around the world in solidarity with Cuba and the international caravans to demand an end to the U.S. blockade of Cuba. A Cuban who lives in South Africa wanted to express her solidarity with her homeland. It's Xiomara Pedroso.
Hello there. I am a Cuban living in South Africa. And this 25th of April 2021, all the people who love Cuba are going to be reunited to demand the lifting of the blockade the United States of America means Cuba. The blockade has lasted more than 60 years, and today is doubly cruel when its measures have been reinforced in the middle of the pandemic of COVID-19. Our families, 11 million Cubans are suffering for the lack of food, the lack of medicines, and the sources of all kinds for their survival. Therefore, from South Africa, I would like to extend this message to President Biden. President Biden, please, lift the sanctions against Cuba. Cuba doesn't need blockade. We need to build bridges of love. No more. No more.
Friends, that was Xiomara Pedroso, a Cuban who lives in South Africa, expressing her solidarity with
Contrary to U.S. claims, Washington's hostile Cuba policy amounts to a fierce economic, trade, and financial blockade.
It is impossible to say that the measures taken and the policy conducted by the U.S. towards Cuba is not an economic blockade in the literal sense of the word.
Carlos Fernández de Cosío, Director General of the U.S. desk at Cuba's Ministry for Foreign Affairs.
It is not only the fact that it prohibits U.S. companies from trading with Cuba or the possibility of exports to Cuba or imports from Cuba. It doesn't only prevent Cuba from carrying out financial transactions with the United States or using U.S. dollars or having transfer of technology from the United States, but also it is a very comprehensive set of coercive economic measures with a very significant extraterritorial impact, meaning that it does not only limit Cuba's trade relationship with the United States, it limits Cuba's trade relationship with the rest of the world. And it provides limitations also in Cuba's financial transactions with the rest of the world or the transfer of technology needed for development from the rest of the world.
And Washington's nearly six-decade-old blockade policy toward Cuba.
And we turn to Radio Habana, Cuba. Thanks for joining us on the radio. We've got a statement now coming up from U.S. activist Gloria Larriba from San Francisco, California, and she expresses her solidarity, her ongoing solidarity with Cuba. Gloria?
This is Gloria Larriba from San Francisco, California. Happy to say hello to the people listening on Radio Havana, Cuba. This morning, people are assembling in many cities across the U.S. to hit the streets with the urgent message to President Biden and Congress that the blockade must end and the 242 measures signed by Trump be lifted. In the United States, despite the majority opinion that the people have no quarrel with the Cuban people and favor the end of the blockade, it remains. Biden promised during his campaign that he would at least return to the policies of Obama regarding Cuba. Now we hear that Juan Gonzalez, National Security Council advisor on Western Hemisphere issues to Biden, has said that there will be no change towards Cuba, meaning that Trump's policy is now Biden's. The only way that things have changed for the positive in our country is for the people to take action. That is why we protest today with the caravan. Young people especially are taking up the call. In Auburn, Alabama, young people are organizing their first caravan to Cuba, as well as in Nashville, Tennessee. In the state of Indiana, there will be caravans in Goshen, in Fort Wayne, Evansville, and Indianapolis, 4 cities in the state of Indianapolis, in Atlanta, Georgia, San Diego, California, Los Angeles, and of course here in San Francisco, but also Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Seattle, Washington, and Washington, D.C., Detroit, Michigan, and more. But more is also happening. Just like what happened during the special period, when people worldwide were aware of the U.S. machinations against Cuba, people are stepping up in solidarity with Cuba. There are campaigns to send what will end up being millions of syringes and hypodermic needles for the massive vaccination campaign on the island. There are resolutions before city councils. There are many actions, film showings, marches, and for the last Sunday of May, we will step it up even more until the June 23rd vote at the United Nations. But this struggle will not stop until the blockade is lifted, until the measures by Trump are reversed, and until we can truly share our friendship that we feel for the Cuban people.
In tune to Radio Havana, Cuba. Thanks for joining us. Gloria Larriva, a U.S. activist from San Francisco, California, there with her statements on the situation with these caravans, the international caravans, the puentes de amor, the bridges of love going on in Cuba and around the world. International solidarity with Cuba. You're tuned to Radio Havana, Cuba, on international shortwave radio frequencies heard around the world. You can pick us up here in Habana at 102.5 FM. And of course, we're on the internet too, on our website. Go to our website. We're streaming in real time. www.radiohc.cu. That's the World Wide Web. www.radiohc.cu. Now let's listen to a number of activists from around the world who express their solidarity with Cuba, participating in the international caravans to demand an end to the U.S. blockade of Cuba.
Hello, my name is Sarah Colburn-Alsop, and I'm a citizen of the United States. And in my position as a person in this country, I am fighting for the administration to hear Cuba, to hear the majority of people in the United States that believe that the blockade should no longer exist. It should have never existed, but more so than ever, we understand, we recognize your independence as a country. We are independent as a country. Therefore, we should not be able to put obstacles, hurdles, and other things in the way that hurt the people of Cuba. We want what you want. We want solidarity, we want friendship, and the only way that can happen is to construct process of solidarity, not destroy the possibility of its potential.
This is Justine Mann reporting from San Diego, California. I'm an organizer with Answer Coalition, and today we are getting ready for our first countywide caravan to demand an end to the Cuban blockade. We have the Party for Socialism and Liberation, the Brown Berets de Aslan, and of course many community members and activists who have been involved in getting ready for this. You know, the Cuban blockade has been in effect since before I was born, and yet I and everyone I know is very aware of it, and we all feel simultaneously disgusted by the blockade and in awe of the Cuban people who give us hope here in the imperialist core that resistance is possible. So we've been planning this caravan for a few weeks, and it was always really exciting and validating to see how responsive people are to the struggle for Cuban liberation. Working class people, once they learn about the blockade and what's really going on between the U.S. and Cuba, they realize we have way more in common with the Cuban people than we do with the wealthy politicians who run things here. To a less extreme degree, poor working people here in the U.S. do kind of have a sense of what it's like to not have access to basic supplies. So we can see the tactics that are being used against both of us, against the Cuban people and working people here. They think that Cuba will stand as an example to scare us away from resisting, but it actually has the opposite effect. We see that the Cuban people thrive despite this genocidal blockade, and then they turn around and they help people all over the world. They invent, they cure, they create art, they grow, and they take care of others, all despite the U.S. trying to starve them out of their freedom. But Cuba shouldn't have to be doing this. The blockade serves only to hurt them and rob them of their liberation. For 6 decades, the Cuban people have been deprived of the most basic items, and not only that, the United States threatens to sanction other countries that try to share their resources with Cuba. Cuba shares their doctors, their vaccines, their treatments with the whole world, and in return, the United States tries to crush them at every turn. It's unfathomable. People here in the U.S. must see the blockade for what it is, and must put their hearts into fighting against it. Our future is inextricably linked with the futures of all working people across the world, and we owe so much solidarity and inspiration to the people of Cuba. We aren't going to stop talking about it. We're not going to stop fighting the blockade until it has ended. So you can expect us out here again next month on May 31st with even higher numbers. because it is a movement for everyone to participate in.
My name is Cristina Flores Malan. I live here in South Africa, and I'm the president of the Association of Cuban Residents in South Africa. Today is a very special day, and I want to share it with you. And I want to start by expressing my gratitude to all the fellow Cubans residents here and the South Africans that actually join us today in front of Mandela statue in the Union buildings to support this amazing initiative, the Bridges of Love, that started in the United States of America and exactly by Carlos Lazo, who is a Cuban teacher that lives in America. I am very happy. I am very happy because we all know that in spite of the problems that we have in Cuba, we all know that the American blockade against Cuba has affected us for many years, for too long, and it's very cruel and it's very unjust. So I want to say that there is no reason whatsoever for a government to impose a blockade against any country. And that is why I would like to call all the Cubans that live everywhere in the world to join this amazing campaign, because this is happening now, this demonstration, this support that we are showing against the American embargo against Cuba. It's happening all over the world. So I would like to call upon all the Cubans that live everywhere and everybody that loves Cuba to join this campaign. Because in the unity, we all know that the more we are, the stronger we are. And as I said before, there is no reason for a government to impose any blockade against any country, but we do have lots of reasons to fight and to continue with this amazing campaign and to support these demonstrations that are being held all over the world from the initiative of Carlos Lazo, these Bridges of Love. We would also love to actually break the rules that separate the Cuban people and the American people, and we would love to actually build bridges of love. So I want to end by saying, please, long live Cuba, stop the blockade, and remember, please, thank you very much again to all the South Africans and the Cubans that were there today, and join this initiative, join this campaign, because I think the more we are, the better the chances that the embargo will lift. Thank you very much. This is me from South Africa.
And those were the many statements of people taking part in today's special activities and international caravans of solidarity with Cuba, demanding an end to the U.S. blockade, the illegal U.S. blockade of Cuba, taking place here in Cuba as well, in Las Villas province, in Santa Clara, in Las Tunas, also the eastern province, and Las Tunas. And of course here in Havana, too, Cuban capital.
From the Communist League in New Zealand. We call for the end of the blockade against Cuba and for the U.S. out of Guantanamo. The blockade is affecting all of the people of Cuba, but also all of the people who want to have relations, even from New Zealand, with Cuba. End the blockade, the United States out of Guantanamo.
Activists around the world speak out against Washington's hostile Cuba policy.
And you tune to Radio Havana, Cuba. Thanks for joining us on the radio. Special programming today from Havana. We've got the world of stamps there, and now we have the mailbag show coming up, where we answer your letters on the air. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another program of the Mailbag Show. This is the weekend edition of the Mailbag Show, heard on Sundays, and